what really is true happiness and how can we sustain it or stay happy?
That's a fantastic question. So there are two broad categories of happiness. One, which is subject to constant change. One which is subject to the temporary nature of this world. Naturally, the question arises, is there a pleasure which will be constantly increasing? Is there a pleasure which will be beyond the pain of change? Yes. So then the soul has to connect with the super soul above. The spiritual pleasure is at the level of Satchid Ananda, eternity full of knowledge, full of bliss. And it goes on increasing. And that is the pleasure which, when anyone is trying to experience, that is what is the spiritual pleasure.
Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of our podcast series, The Happiness Hour. With us today, we have a very special guest, Gauranga Das Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gauranga Das ji is a leadership and mindfulness coach based in Mumbai, a graduate from IIT Bombay. He has found his calling to serve as a monk and has been serving with ISKCON for the last couple of decades. He is also a director of ISKCON's Govardhan Eco Village, founded by Maharaj Radhanath Swami. GV has been a receiver of 36 national and international awards, including the United Nations World Tourism Organization Award in 2017. He is actively involved in sustainable development goals of the UN for climate change. He's also on the board of a high-profile advisory committee of the Central Sanskrit University, the largest multi-campus global Sanskrit university, having 12 campuses across India with 11,000 students studying Sanskrit. He's an administrative director of Bhakti Vedanta Research Center. He also sits on the board of Govardhan School of Public Leadership, an inspirational speaker for his expertise on Vedic knowledge. He is an experienced chef and mega kitchen strategist who has personally cooked over 3 million meals. I couldn't resist sharing that. The list goes on. This was just a very quick snapshot into Prabhuji. This podcast series is really about learning about how to be happy, what are the various perspectives people have of happiness, and how can we stay happy in this very chaotic Kalyug, as we call it, this modern world. Thank you for joining us and giving us your time, Prabhuji, today.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashuji, for inviting me, and look forward to the conversation.
So first of all, I'd like to, I'm sure as everybody else is curious to know that an IIT engineer who joined ISKCON at a very young age, what inspired you to the teachings and practices of ISKCON? And can you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, thank you, Ashuji. And to be honest, I was always very spiritually inclined and curious. I would say that one of my queries always was about death. And from a young age, I had been trying to explore what could be a solution to death. So the question which was always bothering me for a long time was, is death a solvable problem? Because if there is a problem, there must be a solution. So that's how engineers think, right?
Is death a solvable problem? Okay. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yes. So you are, exposed to so many religions across the world today. Christianity has 31% of people out of the 7.5 billion who are Christians. We have 23% Muslims, 15% Hindus, 8.5% Buddhists, which basically means that a major chunk of the world population is affiliated to some religion or another without fully knowing what exactly is the product which these religious traditions are carrying, or without fully appreciating the services which they are providing and the outcome they can potentially give. So, therefore, when I was studying in IIT, I came across the Bhagavad Gita through one of my friends. And then I realized that, yes, actually, just like, there is a banking industry which is giving solution to lack of capital or poverty or whatever. So the entire spirituality and religion industry is actually tuned in to provide solutions to journeys beyond death. So any travel entails planning. Short travel, less planning. Longer travel, more complex planning. So therefore, if you consider life as a journey, then death is a crossroad where beyond death, the soul can have options of multiple destinations. And therefore, spirituality in different traditions is providing those options. And hence, all of these traditions are helping each one of us do our planning for our journey beyond death, and the balance in life and the spirituality which we perform in this life is nothing but part of the preparation for the journey of the soul beyond death. So therefore, that particular journey post death can be precisely attained based on what is your consciousness at the moment of death. So basically, all religions, all traditions have these common factors.
And here we think that we, learn all the Vedic philosophy for the art of living, but you've made it into a journey beyond living into the next realm altogether.
So therefore, Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavad Gita and he called it Bhagavad Gita as it is. And like that, there are many other spiritual teachers who come forth very straightforward and explain the whole thing. Because during COVID, vaccine was in demand. But still, vaccine sales cannot match the Coca-Cola sales. So the one who is in the business of distributing vaccines, if he starts comparing with the Coca-Cola sales and starts thinking that maybe I should dilute the vaccine and make it more of a cola, so then he'll suddenly be in a different business. So we believe that those who are following authentic spiritual line are supposed to be distributing the vaccine and not cola. And so we would like to keep our messaging straight.
So you brought me at a very interesting juncture then here in the conversation, saying that often people confuse Krishna consciousness with a religion rather than a very profound philosophy and truth rather. So what really is the Krishna consciousness way of life?
Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, this, that, old age, new age, all these are, like Taj, J.W. Marriott, this,
brands within that.
Brands within that. So therefore, I really feel that rather than becoming phobic about the word religion and thinking it is, something to do with rituals, if someone says, hey, renewing a passport is a ritual, getting a visa stamped on your passport is a ritual, it's a ritual, but if that ritual is connected to a certain step in your ability to make that travel successful, so it's an essential ritual. So if somebody just says, okay, get the stamp, and he never gets the flight ticket, He gets the flight ticket, but never makes it to the airport. He goes to the airport, but never gets into the flight. So as long as you are going through the motions of all the travel preparation, but never make it to the travel itself, so you will think this is irrelevant. But one who's a frequent traveler across the globe, he gets faith that passport and the visa processing and the ticketing, it's all part of a process which enables my journey. If communication is done with clarity about the content of what religion is, then I don't think people will be phobic towards it, or people will be allergic to it. In fact, they'll just understand that this is part of my journey and ability to choose which kind of spiritual journey I want to take.
I'm going to come to what people relate more easily with, and that is happiness. So you've talked about the journey of the soul beyond death, but looking at this life where we all seek happiness and everything that we do is towards happiness. Often we lose sight of it by getting caught in, the stresses, challenges, and other desires. What really is true happiness, and how can we sustain it or stay happy?
That's a fantastic question. So there are two broad categories of happiness. One, which is subject to constant change. One which is subject to the temporary nature of this world. One which will be mixed with sometimes loss of that happiness. So the Bhagavad Gita basically describes that when the soul, the Jeev within, is trying to exploit Prakriti or nature using karma or action and under the influence of Kala. So these are four topics in any spiritual tradition. Jeev, which is the soul, Prakriti, nature, Kala, time, and Karma, which is action. So when we are trying to eat a gulab jamun, so the gulab jamun hits the tongue and the senses experience some sensation, and we say it is pleasurable. So therefore the body and the senses is the basic level of pleasure, sensual pleasure. Higher than that is when someone engages in music or poetry. It gives you the next level of pleasure. And why it is the next level? Because when you're absorbed in music, sometimes you may forget even eating. The gulab jamun which gave you so much pleasure, you may forget that because you got absorbed in another level. And then higher than mental is the intellectual level of pleasure. So people who are solving an intellectual puzzle, scientists who are absorbed in some deep research, a couple of players sitting and playing chess or bridge. These are intellectually stimulating activities. It gives a higher level of pleasure. So higher than intellectual level of pleasure is the pleasure comes from the sense of accomplishment, achievement. It's called egoistic, at the level of the ego. So sensual, mental, intellectual, egoistical. These are the four levels within the category of pleasure which the soul derives in contact with Prakriti through karma, action, which is nature. But the problem with this four levels of pleasure is it's constantly disappearing. And any small change takes away that pleasure. So the question arises, is there a pleasure which will be beyond change? Which will, because and the prospect of change is the only reason why anybody experiences fear. So you use the word fear, you use the word stress, you use the word anxiety. Stress, fear, and anxiety is caused only due to one reason: change. When there is a prospect of change. And therefore, as today the gulab jamun is very, very delicious, but suppose there is a change in my blood report and the doctor says you are highly diabetic. So the gulab jamun is still there. The poor gulab jamun is still doing its duty of giving its unlimited sweetness. But now, because of the data which I have received from the doctor, I look at the gulab jamun and it is not giving me pleasure. It is giving me pain. Why? Because I cannot have it. The doctor has stopped me, and having this will kill me. So the same gulab jamun which was giving me pleasure now gets the potency to kill me. Right? So therefore, change is the cause of stress and anxiety. So the question arises, or for example, if someone says someone is experiencing egoistical pleasure, that I am the CEO, and then suddenly the board decides to sack him and bring in another CEO. So that change has caused change in his identity and created a lot of trauma and pain. And therefore, for such a person, naturally the question arises, is there a pleasure which will be constantly increasing? Is there a pleasure which will be beyond the pain of change? Yes. So then the soul has to connect with the super soul above. And that's how all the religions come into play now. Okay. All the religions are giving the soul the opportunity to access a certain pleasure which is never going to decrease, which will constantly increase, and which is always available even till the moment of death, irrespective of how many changes you go through. Therefore, that fifth topic of the Bhagavad Gita and all religions is Ishwar. So all religions except Prakriti, Kala, Karma, and Jeev, all religions except Ishwar also. But the definition of the Ishwar, the name of the Ishwar, details about the Ishwar vary. The spiritual pleasure is at the level of Satchid Ananda, eternity full of knowledge, full of bliss. And it goes on increasing. And that is the pleasure which, when anyone is trying to experience, that is what is the spiritual pleasure. So the material pleasure, so the main player in action is the Jeev or the Atma. So when the Atma is trying to invest in Prakriti, in nature, and get returns of pleasure from nature, from Prakriti, that is technically called Bhoga. So the Bhoga, Sukh, is chanchal, fickle, and so subject to continuous stress and anxiety. When that Jiva decides to establish and invest, instead of investing in Prakriti, the Jiva or Atma decides to invest in Ishwar. That investment or a beginning of a relationship of Jiva with Ishwar is called yoga. And the pleasure experienced through yoga is called Yoga Sukh, or it is called Ananda. And therefore, the Bhagavad Gita has spoken on the battlefield to reveal that to get the Yoga Sukh, you don't have to give up your profession. You just have to change the level of your investment. Instead of directly investing Prakriti, first invest in Ishwar. And then accepting Ishwar as our primary connection, then connect with Prakriti. then everything in Prakriti can be utilized for the mission of serving and pleasing the Ishwar. So basically, that's the whole idea of pleasures.
How can the jiva prepare to start investing in the Ishwar? What are some of the practices the jiva or we can do?
Yes. So different personalities are there in this world. Some are action oriented or achievement oriented. So if somebody is achievement oriented, they can offer their achievements or actions in service of the Ishwar. Like Arjuna was a warrior and he was asked to fight for dharma. So that is known as karma yoga. When karma is connected to the Ishwar, it's called karma yoga. Somebody is intellectually oriented. Acquisition of knowledge is their goal. So that is called jnana yoga. Somebody is perfection oriented. They are looking at achieving certain perfections. So that is known as dhyana yoga. So karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. And then someone is oriented towards being connected through love. So that love orientation is directed through bhakti yoga. And what does love mean? Love means service without selfish consideration. So therefore, these are the various ways in which one can engage in yoga. And Bhagavad Gita has all of these descriptions in great detail.
What are some of the practices, like you talked about, of course, selfless service and perfection, or doing service without any outcome orientation? Is there any other practice that one can do?
This is for transforming one's consciousness.
Transforming the consciousness and maintaining that sense of well-being, because well-being has become the stressors. I mean, how much ever the pull between the material world and what we call the spiritual world is very strong.
Right.
And that is where the youth or people at large find it very difficult to stay connected or grounded, anchored with the spiritual world.
So you do accept the fact that mental health challenges are growing.
Correct.
So the question is, suppose there is a whole cohort of diabetes patients, right? And there are a whole group of borderline diabetes. And both of them, after being advised by the doctor not to eat sweets, as soon as they get up, the first thing they do is consume a half a dozen gulab jamuns. As soon as they get up. And then they start complaining, Are, why the sugar levels are growing? Which means they have not followed the doctor's advice. They are supposed to refrain from something, and that which aggravates diabetes is their first diet of the day. So that which is supposed to aggravate your diabetes, if that becomes your first diet of the day, how do you expect that such a population will remain healthy and free from diabetes? So taking the example to mental health, what is the cause of fear? As I said, change. Change is the cause of anxiety and fear. Okay. Therefore, what the mind needs is connection with something which doesn't change. So the jiva, the soul doesn't change, Ishwar doesn't change. So when the soul connects with Ishwar through prayer, then one actually is on a platform of eternity. And hence, all traditions across the world, they begin the day early in the morning, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, with prayer. There is a reason. because it is as per the modes of nature. Tamogun, Rajogun is more favorable towards the evening and night. Sattvagun is early in the morning. And therefore, we begin the day by first emphasizing, reiterating that in spite of all the changes which are going to happen in the day to day, three things are not going to change. Myself as a soul will not change. Number two, my identity as the servant of the Ishwar, that will not change. Third, my ability to serve the Ishwar will not change, because Ishwar is not changing, I am not changing. He is always accessible, I am always inspired. So as long as these conditions are fulfilled, the relation will continue. No external agency can stop it. No external agency can provide a break. That's why Ramayana and Mahabharata are so popular even till today, because they deal with stories of how, in the midst of greatest unexpected uncertainties and adversities, the main protagonists in the story may be Ram or Sita or Krishna, the Pandavas. They continue serving selflessly in the midst of both prosperity and adversity. Prosperity of Ayodhya, adversity of the forest. Prosperity of Hastinapur and prosperity of Indraprastha, and adversity which they go through. And therefore, it's very important for all of us to realize that as soon as I begin my day, I should begin my day preparing myself for the virus which is going to attack me in the day. If I know a virus is going to be injected in the day, I have to inject before that with immunity booster vaccine. So therefore, prayer, the early morning prayer which we offer to the super soul, the Ishvara, is the immunity booster against the virus of change. As soon as person gets up, rather than connecting with that which will not change, he immediately picks up the smartphone and starts checking the feed, starts checking the latest updates. So you are bombarding the already unstable, volatile mind with further distraction. First thing in the morning. So seeing the smartphone and bombarding the mind with all the various messages first thing in the morning is like a diabetic taking half a dozen gulab jamun as soon as he gets up. So therefore, mentally, you are becoming extremely vulnerable first thing in the morning. Rather than strengthening, you are beginning the day in a weak position.
On that note, I will say thank you very much. That's been very enriching for me, and I'm sure for the listeners that one of the biggest takeaways is begin your day in prayer to live a more balanced and mentally stable, anchored life so that you can combat that's your armor to combat all the stresses of everyday life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Ashu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.